The Spoonful of Strength podcast is now the Spoonful Show. This podcast brings strength, humor, and heart to the chronic illness community. Inspired by the spoon theory, which shows us that even with fewer spoons, we can still live fully. This show highlights real spoony topics and practical insights to help you feel less alone and more empowered. I'm your host, Rachel, and together we'll take on this journey one spoon at a time. Welcome back to the Spoonful Show. I'm Rachel, and I'm so happy that you're with me today. Can you all believe we have 2 weeks till Christmas? I can't believe this. Seems like this year has flown by, but maybe even just the last 6 months has flown by. And I am an early gift buyer, and I started late this year, but I'm almost done. So I'm trying to get things done as quickly as possible so that I can relax the last few weeks before Christmas. But I hope that you're relaxing too and saving some spoons for the upcoming holiday. Today, I'm joined by Tammy Gangloff, a therapist, educator, and author of Chronic Illness and Eating Disorders, Assessment, Clinical Skills, and Lived Experiences. Tammy's work bridges psychology, trauma, chronic illness, and lived experience in a way that feels both human and incredibly necessary. I went into this interview wanting to talk more about eating disorders, but the conversation unfolded into something even more powerful. We talk about the medical trauma, hyper-independence, and the very human instinct to avoid being a burden, especially when your body has required help. And we explore interdependence, a concept she writes beautifully about. The idea that accepting help doesn't erase your independence is actually part of how healthy relationships survive and strengthen. This episode is validating, honest, and filled with moments that make you stop and say, yes, that's exactly what it feels like. So let's bring in Tammy. So, welcome, Tammy, to the podcast. I'm so excited that you joined me today. And we're here to talk about your new book, Chronic Illness and Eating Disorders, Assessment, Clinical Skills, and Lived Experience. How are you doing today?
I am doing really well. Here's my baby. I'm doing great. Thanks so much for inviting me on your podcast. I'm excited to talk today.
Yes, good, good. Can you start just by introducing yourself to our listeners?
So I am Tammy Gangloff. I am aware of a lot of different hats professionally, but first and foremost, I personally am someone that grew up with scoliosis, and I have a lot of other diagnoses and kind of a lifetime of my own journey with being in a body that doesn't work the way it's supposed to. And then I became a therapist, I guess almost 20 years ago now, specializing in eating disorders, also addiction, and I also teach and do a lot of other things. So the book really just came out of my personal experience and then also clinical skills and anything I can get my hands on. That's me. And I live in Pennsylvania with my boyfriend, and I have 4 cats.
Oh my gosh. That's great. That's great. I have 2, so not quite there yet, but well, your book is very interesting. You share your personal journey with scoliosis, multiple spine surgeries, and eating disorder, alcoholism, and PTSD. Can you tell me a little bit about your personal journey that encouraged you to write the book?
Yeah, so my personal journey to mention sobriety, I've been sober over 28 years now. So I got sober at 22, so I've lived pretty much my whole adult life sober. And my eating disorder, I went back to treatment for the last time, early sobriety. So it's been a very long time there. And it was through my treatment, my last treatment for my eating disorder, that I was first diagnosed with PTSD, and had done a ton of work on that, all different levels of care. And then fast forward to, we're almost at my 7-year anniversary of my complex spine fusion, right, where I had 3 surgeries over 2 separate days. I'm actually going to stop in and visit my spine doctor and surprise him with his copy of the book because he's in the acknowledgments. I
Oh,
haven't seen him in a bit. So, and so when I had my surgery, one thing people don't talk about is the mental health impact of it. And so, about 3, 4 months after surgery, I started having nightmares and anxiety, and I was angry. And so, all these things. And I was like, what is wrong with me? And then, I found one study that said that 1/5 of those with a low back spine fusion, which is mine's longer than that, develop PTSD. And I was like, that's a lot of people. And then I was like, okay, like I recognize these symptoms in, from what I had in my past. And so then I created a survey just for scoliosis, spine fusion specifically, asking questions about mental health, body image, all those things, and just posted it on social media. And I figured like 20 people would respond, and I got 185 responses. And I was like, I need to do something with this. So I started, submitting to present at conferences. So I talked at online at a scoliosis conference, and then it kind of took on a life of its own, sort of. And then at the time, follow me here. At the time, I had my spine surgery. I was in triathlon and I did long distance open water swimming, and so I had all these really very kind, well-meaning friends saying like, I totally get what you're going through. When I had this injury, I felt the same way, and I would be like, they don't know. Thank you, but no. It was very kind in response, I think. And then fast forward to a little over 2 years ago, I was doing a Spartan race, as you do after a spine surgery. I don't do them anymore, but my spine doctor did know I did them. I had a pretty far fall and I broke my wrist in 4 places. I fractured my clavicle and sprained this wrist. So I figured it would be a super short recovery compared to spine surgery, and it was a very long recovery. It was very taxing mentally. And I started feeling all the same feelings I felt with my spine surgery, and I was like, oh, I can do something with this. I couldn't find really any books on chronic illness that I thought were good, but there are a lot on sports injury psychology, and so I started putting the pieces together and then put in the pieces together with the eating disorder piece, because although I'm recovered for a long time, I couldn't use my limbs, right? To make myself food. So I have the resources to ask dietitians, like, can you give me some suggestions? Because I have to rethink how I'm nourishing myself right now. And I had a lot of supports in my life to help me do things like grocery shopping and open Gatorade bottles. I lived alone at that time, but it really made me think of those that are still struggling with disordered eating, who maybe kind of were on the fine line of it and then developed it because it would have been really easy to not eat, especially after surgery, right? You're feeling nauseous and crappy anyway. And so I just started writing, and then here we are.
yeah. Okay, great. And I love that your book kind of weaves together your personal story, um, but also includes some of your professional expertise. What made you decide that now was the time to kind of put this story out there?
I think it was really having that injury and that surgery really just propelled me to do that. I've always wanted to write, but didn't really know the time. And so after that happened, I presented at a conference just over 2 years ago now in Nashville, the Renewed Conference, about this topic. And then somebody said, when are you going to write a book? And I was like, well, so I turned that into a book proposal, but the why now is really just I was searching for resources and couldn't find any. No resources for specific, like evidence-based treatment for somebody with a chronic illness, plus an eating disorder, very little research. So I think I've mentioned probably a number of times in my book that, we need more research here, or I couldn't find research on this topic. And so I just felt like sometimes we need to be a voice when somebody can't use theirs. And so I was like, I felt like this drive that I needed to do it. I do have other lived experiences in my book, as you know, but yeah, I felt like it's something that needed to be out there in the world to start the conversation and hopefully change some directions that we've been going in that have left those with chronic illness forgotten. somewhat. So.
You spoke earlier about mental health. So you've battled quite a bit to overcome. What has helped you going through all those years mentally?
So, therapy. So back in the days when I struggled with disordered eating and alcoholism, I did seek treatment. So I did go into a residential treatment center for an eating disorder. And then also I did go to rehab in like 1997. So all that treatment was back then. I did also, I haven't shared this yet. I don't think I mentioned it in the book, but I did actually, when I moved back from California after my divorce, seek mental health treatment for my PTSD. So I did go inpatient for a few weeks. I just wasn't in a good place. And with my background in psychology, I was like, okay, this isn't something we wait around for. It's time to seek help. So I continue to go to therapy a lot over the last however many years, decade plus. Not all the time, but I think, when things pop up, it's time to go take a look at them. So I've done regular talk therapy. I've done EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing therapy. I'm not trained in it, but it was receiving it as a client. It really helped me quite a bit. So just continuing to do that work. I think whenever we get to a point where we realize that our life is being interrupted by what's going on mentally and emotionally, it's time to do something about it. So I'm all about continuing therapy and then really reaching out to the support people that you have in your life. Is really important, even though you might not want to. There are times I don't want to either, but
Yeah.
we're not meant to do this alone.
Yeah. There's still that mental health stigma, although it's gotten a lot better. There's still, there are some people that maybe don't receive that well. And so that can be lonely. Now you wrote in your book that actually seeing somebody else recover from an eating disorder was a turning point for you. So can you tell us about that moment?
Yes, I remember that moment vividly. It was when I was in treatment for the last time for my eating disorder. I was in day treatment, so I wasn't in residential, but I would go Monday through Friday. And this woman came in, and she looked like she had it all together. And I said, there's no way she possibly felt as bad as I felt in that moment. And then I heard her share a story and I was like, yeah, she felt this way and she got through it and she is living this full life. And life recovered anyway, we'll get into that isn't perfect either, right? But I assumed that that I would need to go to treatment every few years and that would just be my life because in sobriety I had met a lot of people that had many, many years of sobriety. And so I knew that that was possible, but I didn't know that this was possible. And so, with hearing that and learning her story, I was like, whoa, I'm going to do everything. And so at the time, I was in the mortgage business. Very fast paced, numbers driven. And so I stayed out of work for 6 months. It took as long as I could for short term disability and just I did all of the therapy, art therapy, psychiatry, nutrition. There weren't really that many specialized eating disorder dietitians like there are now. But I did everything, I could possibly do. And I really didn't look back. It wasn't an easy part of the journey, but just knowing that um, fully recovering was an option just was a game changer for me.
I wonder what your recovery would look like had you not had that connection with her.
I think there was a lot of suffering and I'll say that the alcoholism plus the eating disorder together. I hate saying this, but I'll say it that the field still hasn't evolved nearly enough as far as being able to really treat both together. It just isn't there yet after all these years. So I think there's continued suffering and not having the support that you need. And so having heard from her specifically, because your therapist can tell you, like, you can do this. I believe in you. You can fully recover. And back in those days, clinicians were really discouraged from self-disclosure about their own recovery. So there may have been people I was working with that had recovered and I just didn't know. And so having heard from like somebody who had been there and the kind of real raw version of her story, I was like, okay, Um, side note, I teach, I teach a college class on eating disorders. And last week, somebody who treated me when I was in treatment using psychodrama, another good modality for trauma, came in and taught a section to my class. And I was in her therapy group when I was in residential treatment. And back then, I was one of the clients that they were like, she might not make it. I was in that category of, self-destructive lifestyle. So, um, having heard that, I was like, oh, I don't have to self-destruct because I don't like how I feel. I don't like what I've been through. There's another option. There's another path I can take.
You highlight the connection between chronic illness and eating disorders, and that's something that's not really discussed a lot. So why do you think that this link is overlooked?
I think people don't know to ask. I think it's when we take someone's history, whether they're coming into outpatient therapy or seeing a nutritionist, or anything in between, it's maybe part of somebody's history, and it's like, okay, this is part of their history. We'll put this over here, but it really typically isn't actively a part of a treatment plan. Addressing, we would say things in treatment like, let's talk about what your body can do, not what it looks like. And I'm like, well, that doesn't work for someone whose body doesn't work the way society says it should, and it's not going to, right? So I think that it's something that's been missed. I think people with chronic illnesses and disordered eating don't seek treatment. And then there's also the other way where this kind of dissatisfaction with your body can lead to disordered eating. Your body image is impacted not just by society telling you you should look a certain way, but also my body doesn't feel the way I hope it would. I can't function the way I want to. And so that leads to disordered patterns with food also. So there's so many different connections. So one can lead to the other and vice versa. And I don't know that a lot of people have made that connection just yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that connection until I read your book, and you're right in the way that somebody with chronic illness, I mean, our bodies go through so much, and especially with limited mobility, you may gain some weight, and just that could kind of take you into a tailspin as far as eating and using eating as a coping mechanism and things like that. And so it was so interesting to read that connection and really, look into that. Now, during your recovery, you decided to become a marriage and family therapist. So what inspired you to go that route and help others heal while you were still in recovery?
So I felt a pull to do that. And so by the time I went back to grad school, I'd been sober like maybe 12 or so years. And so I'd been in pretty good solid recovery from my eating disorder for almost a decade. So it'd been a long time, but early on, even before I was really fully in recovery, I was like, people need to hear this after I heard this woman speak. And so the very first time I told my story publicly was actually in a psychology class where I went to undergrad, which is where I teach now at Westchester University in Pennsylvania. And so I was like, I just need people to understand this. And I did this news interview, which like I hate how it went, but like I was like, whoever can possibly listen. And so I always felt that drive. And so I started doing some eating disorder awareness things, and I moved out west. And I learned of the treatment center, which is where I ended up getting my training. And I mentioned Carolyn Costin in my book. And so I saw her website and it said treatment by recovered professionals. And I was like, wow, that's a thing. Um, and so when I moved to California, I immediately went to one of her study groups, and I was like, all right, it's time for me to go back to school. And so it was really just, I always felt driven. And to me, I couldn't think of any other reason why I had been through all of the things I had been through, other than putting it into, helping other people, really kind of like what you're doing, taking your, as they say, it's cliche, but like that pain into purpose is,
Yeah.
what that is.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that because yeah, it is so true. And I'm sure that um, the people that you work with feel a sense of like you get it. And sometimes with family members or therapists, you can, like you said, they can say, oh, well, you can do it, you can go through this, but to really know that you've been there and can really relate to them, I think is really important. So for listeners who have chronic illness, what are some early warning signs that food or body image may start to become like a coping mechanism?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think really just noticing emotional eating, which by the way is normal. We all eat emotionally sometimes, but just
Mm.
noticing like, am I eating emotionally more than a couple days a week? So just like that really, really early warning signs, or am I noticing that I'm over focusing on my body when I'm looking in the mirror? And then even just kind of the early depression warning signs, like, am I starting to withdraw from my friends and family? And then, just am I changing my clothes a bunch of times? Just kind of like the early, yellowish red flags. And then, dieting is a part of our culture. But I'd say if somebody starts cutting out whole food groups, like if somebody doesn't need to be gluten free, but they're like, I'm just going to cut it all out, or, and that's actually a hazard, right? Because a lot of doctors will say, try going dairy and gluten free, even if you don't need to. Um, that can easily lead down a path also. So I just say, be wary of those really restrictive diets also. And then, social media, I think, plays a big role. And seeing a lot of people doing things you can't do can also be a trigger. So I'd say, if you notice yourself even going down that rabbit hole of, over focusing on other people's bodies and what they can do as compared to what you can't do. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
Yeah.
just,
Yeah, I think those are really, really good tips because it can it can be difficult when your body's not behaving in the way that you feel that it should. Or, I'm 48, I walk like I'm 75. I so there can be a lot of that body image issues as far as feeling a lot older than you are. In fact, we had an episode
Mhm.
earlier this season about just that. So know that you answered that question perfectly. Are you looking for merch that speaks to your truth and makes you laugh? Spoonful of Strength has you covered. Literally. From t-shirts and hoodies to mugs and magnets, every design is made for the chronic illness community with heart, humor, and a whole lot of strength. Funny? Check. Inspirational? You bet. Illness specific? Absolutely. And the best part? I can personalize any design or create a custom shirt for you for no extra charge. So whether you're laughing through the pain or wearing your diagnosis with pride, our designs are funny, fierce, and illness specific, because being chronically ill doesn't mean being chronically boring. So if you want a sweatshirt that gets you, head to spoonfulofstrength.etsy.com. Now that's spoonful with 2 L's. Use code podcast for 20% off your entire cart. You also talk in your book about the idea of interdependence, that asking for help doesn't take away independence. That's something too that I know people with chronic illness struggle with. I have for many years of asking for help, knowing my boundaries. So can you explain what that means in the chronic illness world, that interdependence?
Yes. I'll say, I think to preface that, I think a lot of us become hyper independent, right? Like,
Yeah.
I got this. I don't need your help, because maybe we've experienced, I know I have, and you probably read your negative experiences in relationships when you kind of felt like maybe you paid the price for asking for help. And so to me, interdependence means that, in relationships, right, none of us are giving 50-50. That's just not how life is. And so this could be with, a friend, a family member, your, romantic partner, that just because I might not be able to do all the physical, like tangible things, I can also be a really great support. And so maybe I'm more of an emotional, mental support, and you're maybe more of the one doing like the literal, physical, heavy lifting. But it's important to feel like you're giving in some way. And so for me, that it's just that, like, I'm maybe the one who's organizing the things and scheduling the appointments and planning things. And then my partner is the one who is, helping out more around the house. And even in friendships, it's friendships when you're going through, I call it like right now, my body's in a difficult season. And so, knowing that I am a great friend and also my friends are reaching out to me more right now. So it's also that ebbs and flows, like maybe friendships are 70-30 sometimes. And that's okay. And how I give back a lot of times is that, people will ask me questions about what I do for work and ask for resources. I'm like, that's something easy that I can do that somebody else can't do. So I can give back in those ways. So just really looking at like, what can I do right now? How can I give back? And allowing that to be enough for you to give back and then also accept help from somebody else. It's tough though. It's a really tough thing to do. For me, it's really it's really difficult. And again, I go through phases of it, but I think it's really more apparent when I had an injury earlier this year that's still lingering, right? So as I'm 50, so as we get older too, it's harder. Our bodies take longer to recover. And so really allowing myself to ask for that help was hard. And now I'm just like, okay, I'm going to wait for my boyfriend to get home from work tomorrow to carry my suitcase down the stairs because I can't do it right now. Or maybe I can, but I'll hurt myself. So
Mhm.
allowing space for that also.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so hard. I love how you talk about balancing it. So, as far as like the medical PTSD, what would you like medical professionals to understand better about how they treat the patient?
There really isn't much training, right, for medical providers and the mental health space. So I really would like to see more training, on all mental health disorders, but especially, just looking at the PTSD lens. I found one article in one book on pre-surgical psychological assessment. And so I think doctors need to utilize tools like that, but also really being educated on there is something called medical trauma. If you're in, and anyone is susceptible, right? Not just the spoonies. Anyone is susceptible, but we are more because we're in right medical offices. For me, this year, multiple times a week, right? Many medical procedures, so we're at much greater risk. So just the understanding that this is a patient who probably has experienced medical trauma, and is coming into my office being really anxious and nervous. And so I need to be patient and take the time to listen and answer all the questions. And, I think sometimes just the way our world is, medicine doesn't allow the time and space for empathy. And as you know, empathy goes a long way sitting in that office when you're really stressed, you're in pain, you're scared. And so I think that firsthand knowledge of not just the mental health, but also like how do I, as a medical doctor, build rapport with my patient, build that trust so that they can feel comfortable. Like I have an appointment for upcoming surgery tomorrow. The surgery is not tomorrow, the appointment is. And so I have a list of questions in my phone because when you go to an appointment, you're anxious, you might forget your questions. So always write your questions
Yes.
down. And I chose this doctor because she took the time to answer every single question. And that also can make you feel safe too. So for doctors to know, like, let me take the time to really make a patient feel seen and heard because that gaslighting is a real thing. I'll share this. This is my fifth GYN this year. Women's health is a whole other topic. And this is the first one that's really made me not now like, oh, well, this test was this, so you're okay. I'm like, but I'm not okay. So this is the first person that made me feel seen and heard and answered all my questions. So for doctors to know that, like, I know your time is limited, and also we need to, patients are people, right? People and the things you say in the office impact our whole lives, right? So that conversation might be one of 25 you're having with patients that day, but also like this is a person with a life and feelings. I had a doctor earlier this year recommend another spine surgery, and I was like, whoa, 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 we're not there yet. I'm injured, I'm in pain, I'm super limited right now. And also, like, don't throw the spine surgery word out at me after what I've been through. And
Yeah.
it didn't go well, but I stuck up for myself. I think I made him mad, but that's okay. So also know you can make your doctors mad because it's you're the expert on your body.
Yeah.
I think doctors also need to hear that. Like, let your patient be the expert. And I know in the book I talk about therapeutic alliance that, especially those of us that have been lifelong patients, we're pretty, we know a thing or two, and so come alongside and make decisions together instead of that kind of authoritative, right? Like that's really be a true alliance. I always say that for me, maybe my wrist surgeon, I broke my wrist, he fixed it. That's not a long-term relationship. That's an acute thing. But for me, spine and all of the other things, like that's a long-term relationship. Like,
Yeah.
so we need to like be in it together and have that really trusting relationship. So doctors need to leave space for that also.
Mm. Yeah. That's that's heartbreaking, the amount of stories that I've heard from people who just have been run through the ringer with doctors and staying with doctors that maybe aren't the best for them, and it I love how you say you can make them angry, because I'm not, I could be a better advocate. I do worry about making them angry or questioning them, but ultimately it's my body and it's my life, and if that's not the right practitioner for me, then maybe there's one out there that would make a difference.
Yes, yes. And I think I talk about it in the book, but also I just did a reel about like how finding a physical therapist, how finding a doctor is like dating, right? If you went on a few dates with somebody and they got angry at your third date, you'd be like, we're not dating anymore. So I think the same is true for doctors. If you can get mad and they can respond in a calm way, that's a good person to stay in relationship with. If they can't, then see you later. Easier said than done, but I give everyone permission to get a second opinion, get a third opinion. Yeah, and trust your gut, trust your body. Because I think when we and again this applies for eating disorders and chronic illness, you learn to not trust your body and not trust your instincts, and we can do that. It just is allowing yourself to say, oh, okay, this didn't feel right in this appointment. I need to speak my mind. And listen, I have shared with a number of providers, whether it's a PT or doctor or someone else, why I'm not going to see them again. And the purpose isn't to be a brat, it's to say, please don't do this to another patient.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'll get on my soapbox any day about that.
Yeah. Yeah. My therapist says the same thing when he's talking to me, and he's like, I'll get off my soapbox. But um um so I love that you end your book with the message that you can live a life with joy and resilience in the presence of pain. So what does resilience look like for you today?
Right now, today, it looks like, because I think the assumption with resilience means that you're bouncing back, and there's no bouncing back, not for anybody. We don't bounce back to anything. It's right now, today, it means that I am doing just that. I'm living my life and doing the things I can do that bring me joy right now. Physically, I can't do what I could do a year ago. Will I be able to do those things again? Maybe, but maybe not. And so, how can I have joy in my life? So, Sunday, I'm going to have brunch with a friend. Typically, that might be a hike or a walk and then brunch. I'm not hiking right now, so we're having brunch instead. And so, finding joy in those moments, not waiting for the other thing to happen. It's tricky though, because we are also always seeking to not be in pain, right? That's all the medical appointments. So I'm accepting that I'm here where I am right now, finding joy in the moments and in the days, and finding those small moments. Like I went on a cruise for my 50th last year, and that was amazing. That was a big thing. I'm not doing that right now, so let me find joy in the small moments, like my coffee. And I don't normally get my nails done, but I'm gonna get Halloween nails today.
Yeah.
Just joy in those small moments, I think is really, really important, knowing that I'm a value, my life is a value, even if my body isn't doing the things that I want it to do. And it's hard to do. I mean, I usually, when I get to a place of acceptance, which I think is part of resilience, it takes me time to get there. So I might need to cry and fight and push people away a little bit. And then I'm like, okay, this is where I'm at. This is where I need to be. I need to settle in. That could be, I need more therapy, or whatever it is. But I can enjoy this moment.
Mhm.
And that's how I end in the end of the book. That's kind of how I ended it. Like, I'm not running anymore. I grieved that. I was sad about it, and like it's okay now, and I can enjoy the other things in life instead.
Mhm. What do you hope that readers get from your book? If there was one or two things that you really hope they walk away from?
Of course, I hope they walk away not feeling alone, right? Feeling seen and heard and understood, and then hopefully with some skills to use too, whether it's using them just with their themselves in their journal or with a friend or bringing it into therapy. And just I think the hope that even though your body is the body that you have, right? You still are of value and can have a really good life. Not in spite of it, but just because it's a part of who you are. It's not your whole identity.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And we're going to link the book to all of our Instagram as well as the description for the podcast. But can you tell us where our listeners can buy your book, where they can find you on social media, websites, anything like that?
Yes, it's very easy. It's just my name. So you can get my book on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and my website is just my name. It's tammygangloff.com. And then my socials, my Instagram and my Facebook are just author Tammy Gangloff. So nice and simple. I would add, it used to be the scoliosis swimmer, and then my book person was like, you should probably change that so you're easy to find. So,
Uh,
and I love to chat with people. So if anyone wants to reach out, there is a link on my website, a contact form, or just sending me. I think we message each other through either my website or Instagram. I can't remember which one. So yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And you have some good resources on your website as well.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Yes. So I started reaching out to clinicians that specialized in working with chronic illnesses and eating disorders because I'm just me. And so I have, I think, 27 people now listed on my website. It says referral network. And there's people all over the US. There's one person in Canada, and it's a mix of therapists and dietitians. So there are a lot of people that have, and a lot of them have their own personal lived experience, which I think is helpful also. So it's a really cool network of people. I'm really excited to have met all of them and get to share this with them.
So important. I love that. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure to meet you. I loved your book, and I think it could be a really great resource for the chronic illness community as well as outside of the chronic illness community. But just thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much. It was really a pleasure to have this conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you so much for listening to this conversation with Tammy Gangloff, author of Chronic Illness and Eating Disorders, Assessment, Clinical Skills, and Lived Experiences. We'll tag her book in the description so you'll know where to find it. There's something that while Tammy was talking about, this thought kept coming into my head, the fact that medical trauma, like the cruelest thing about it is that the places that are meant to heal you are often the ones that traumatize you instead. And that medical trauma is real. And it's something that I'm looking forward to talking about more in the future. It's a reality that so many people with chronic illness carry silently. And today's episode is a reminder that your fear, your hesitation, your hyper independence, none of it means you're weak. It just means that you adapted to survive. And I'm grateful for Tammy's honesty, the way she blended clinical experience with her lived experience, and her commitment to shedding light on the emotional layers of chronic illness, those that are often ignored in medical spaces. If this story resonated with you, check out her book. It's an incredible resource for providers, patients, caregivers, and anyone trying to understand the intersection of chronic illness and mental health and disordered eating and medical PTSD. And as always, thank you for saving some of your spoons to be here with me today. I'll be back next week with another great episode of The Spoonful Show. Take care. Thank you for listening to The Spoonful Show. Follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. Leave a rating, review, and comment. Connect with me on Instagram at Spoonful of Strength and TikTok at spoonful.of.strength. Remember, that's spoonful with 2 L's. Shop customized t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, mugs, and more on our Etsy shop at spoonfulofstrength.etsy.com and use code podcast for 20% off your entire cart.